First of all, let me say how exciting this session has been so far. I've been really fascinated. I am so focused on helping kids learn other languages that it's one of those ideas where let's eliminate all of the structural barriers that have existed with that learning and go. So the challenge is developing a system that we know can better reflect what we know about learning itself. Which one I'm using?
You can use this, not
Oh, this one.
these ones, yeah.
Okay. So today I want to explore whether education may be approaching a certain moment. There's an Austrian philosopher that wrote an introduction to a book years ago that always captured me. He said, to live in an evolutionary spirit means to engage with full ambition and without any reserve in the structures of the present, and yet to let go and to flow into new structures when the right time has come. And the question for us today is, are we at that time when we've had the structures that have enabled us to go so far, but now is it time to flow into new structures? And I love to use the Fibonacci spiral here because it gives credit to everything that has come before. I will never criticize what we've done before because that has brought us to this point. So my question is, what if the problems that we've been facing are not because of what we've been doing, but because of the design of the system itself? So most proposals that I hear, not just at this conference, but elsewhere, about the future of education focus on things like better instruction, better engagement, better assessment, better technology, more personalization. I think these are all things that we have all been striving for throughout our careers. But what if the problem isn't the quality of what we've been doing? What if we have reached the pinnacle of what the structures that we've been using are really able to offer? So the problem is the design of the system, I would say. So the central question is, what if the future of education can't emerge from the structures of the present? So this is the central question. We often try to innovate while preserving assumptions about timing, grouping, pacing, curriculum, assessment, all of those things that we have taken for granted. But the question isn't whether those structures were wrong. The question is, are they still necessary in the world we have today? So in my paper, you'll find the research that supports the concepts, but most educational structures still assume far more uniformity than the research suggests because learners vary. I heard an earlier presentation where it was personalized, but it was still putting students in various groups based on certain characteristics, but still we weren't able to really personalize to the individual. Readiness varies. I taught French, and many of my students on day one already had different levels of preparation for what I was going to do, and I had no way to deal with that. Pathways vary. Students want to do different things for different reasons. And meaning making is personal. There's an interesting book published about a year ago called Putting Ourselves Back in the Center, which was about a quantum theory applied to the individual, that real learning occurs only from the individual out. It doesn't come from what the teacher is doing and then tries to transfer to the learner. It only starts and ends with the learner, but we've not had structures that could accommodate that. Human variation is not a problem to solve. It's a reality that we can actually design for now. So the contradiction between these factors is difficult to ignore. We have fixed pacing for all learners, age-based grouping, standardized pathways and sequences, uniform demonstrations of learning. And yet we know that learners progress at different rates, readiness emerges unevenly, pathways to understanding vary, and meaning making is personal. We know all of those things, but we don't have the structures that can help us accommodate it because growth depends on responsiveness, not uniformity. So, hey, how do we place the learner at the center? Many structures operate as if preserving the structure of the present is the most important thing. And then we have to figure out ways to put the learner into those structures in order for success to occur. But what changes if we reverse that relationship? What happens if the learner is not a variable in the system, but the learner is the reason for the system? And you're going to hear the practical application of this from my colleague, Dr. Ryan Allen, this afternoon, when he talks about a classroom that he's had that will blow your socks off, I guarantee. Just to give you a teaser, he was trained as a Spanish teacher. He now has a class in facilitated interdependent learning where he has, for instance, 25 kids learning 10 different languages in the same class, and he only speaks Spanish. And yet they've been remarkably successful based on external assessments. So one possibility is we shift more meaningful decisions to the learner. So we know the world has changed. We know knowledge is expanding, and yet we don't have a way to accommodate that in our classrooms. We have a certain body of content that we are required to transmit to the learners, and yet the amount of knowledge that's available is unending now. Learners need more than a system built for a different era. The old model just can't deliver the future. We must redesign for what's possible. So we have to go from critique to design. So we need a different organizing logic. So I believe very strongly in student agency, and there's been a lot of research on the effectiveness of student agency. But once again, we don't really have structures that allow the learner to be at the center. We still find that we have to try to control them. There is a writer that I really like, kind of a popular writer, named Daniel Pink, who wrote a book called Drive, the success to motivating people. And he said, what we need to do is to give people, and he wasn't just talking about learners, he said, we have to give people control over these 4 elements: time, team, task, and technique. How do we give students agency over what they want to learn, over how long it's going to take them to do? How do we give them agency over who they want to learn with, somebody who might be anywhere in the world, and how they want to do it? Some students are very visual, some are very kinesthetic. How do we accommodate all of those in one class without it descending into absolute chaos, right? So in a situation like facilitated interdependent learning, the teacher's role evolves. Now, it's very important that you understand that term interdependent. Oftentimes when I'm talking with people about this and they see that I word, they think independent. And what facilitated interdependent learning is anything but having a room full of kids sitting in front of computers. That's not it at all. It's interdependent, where the teacher's role dramatically shifts from being the the old saying about shifting from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. How do we do that in the current system? We really can't. And that's not a criticism of what we've been doing. It's just that, hey, there are new ways, new structures that we can adopt now. So the teacher's role actually in a Phil environment becomes much more important than it was before, because now they're not delivering content. Now they are helping kids learn. So I mentioned Ryan, and he'll talk more about his class, but his job is not to teach those languages. His job is to help each learner learn those languages. And that's what he's assessed on, is how successfully was he able to help his learners achieve an increased level of proficiency in the language that they had chosen. Sorry, I get really excited about this because it's such, I'm old, right? I am more excited about what I've been doing in the last few years than anything I did before. And I've always tried to be innovative. But Phil really is new structural ways, because now the learner has certain things they must understand. So we use the ACTFL proficiency guidelines, not the SEFR, but something comparable to that. And in the ACTFL proficiency guidelines, it goes from novice low all the way up through distinguished. And distinguished would be the equivalent of somebody with an advanced degree in their language, right?
Like
So, yeah,
C1.
right, exactly. C1. So you're never going to get that in a high school class, right? But what you do is you are very transparent about, here are the proficiency levels. Now it's going to be up to you to advance through those proficiency levels to the place that you want to advance, right? So let's imagine that you had, what's his name that does all of the travel videos? Rick Steves. Say you had Rick Steves coming into your language class on day one, and you said, Rick, I'm going to make you such a good student in my French class that after 4 years, you're going to pass the AP exam with a 5. And Rick says to me, hey, Mr. Welch, you may be able to do that. You've done it for other kids, but that's not what I want.
How long? For how long?
4 years, maybe I get them to that. But Rick Steves says, no, I don't want to get to the AP level in French. He says, what I want to do is to get to intermediate mid in 4 languages. Well, Rick, I'm a French teacher, but with Phil, I can help you do that. That will be my job, to help you reach the proficiency level that you have decided on. And you're going to do that at the rate that is right for you. Now, in the Phil class, the other interesting thing about it that balances that out is students don't get a credit in the language class until they reach a certain level of proficiency. So they can't just sit back in class and say, oh, I'll just kind of glide along like I do in some of my other classes. They have to reach a certain level of proficiency. So you talk about a motivator. When they know they don't get credit until they reach a level of proficiency that has been validated externally. So this is no, Dr. Allen has his tests that you have to take in all these different languages. No, we use external assessments of proficiency, either ACTFL's Apple assessment, or we oftentimes use one developed by Avant called the STAMP test, that all are aligned to the ACTFL proficiency guidelines. So this makes it very transparent. The student never has to wonder, what do I have to do to get a credit, right? All they have to do is go, and these are explained in much more detail on the ACTFL side, but they know, oh, here's what I have to be able to know and do, what I have to, the level of speaking that I need to achieve, the level of writing that I need to have. All of the basic skills they know ahead of time, what they have to achieve before they get a credit. It's incredible. So Phil isn't a language program. It's a structural response to variation. It assumes that learners pursue different pathways while they still benefit from community, facilitation, transparency, and shared accountability. So Ryan has all of these students in the class. You wonder, how can they be doing anything together? He's figured out ways to still have community. You can listen to him this afternoon for that part. So the goal is not individualization alone. The goal is honoring variation at scale. So if you return to the title of my presentation, how do we honor variation at scale? We've not had a system that allowed us to do that. Now, I'm not saying Phil is going to be the answer for everybody, but I do think that it is one way that we can look at a different structure for people. So, evidence, emergence. Ryan has all of these things. It wasn't randomness that happened. Students selected pathways connected to their interests. For instance, he had a student who was interested in learning Japanese, and the student wanted to learn about colors. And Ryan said, "Why do you want to learn about colors?" And he said, "Well, online, I play Minecraft with a lot of kids from Japan." Ryan said, "Oh, well, your goal this week is not to learn colors. Your goal is to learn to play Minecraft in Japanese." And the kids said, You mean I can play Minecraft in class?" And Ryan was able to say, "Yes, because you know what your goal is, you know what you're trying to achieve. I'm helping you do that. And yes, according to your interests, you're going to be able to learn what you do." So the most striking result was that learners often worked harder when the learning belonged to them. And we know that that's what the research on student agency says. So just quickly here, I just have a couple minutes left. External validation, ownership, access, persistence, and proficiency growth. Those are what the facilitator is looking for. And so the interesting thing about this is proficiency now belongs to the learner. It doesn't belong to the class. You're not taking a class at the intermediate low level. You are where you are. One of our primary guiding principles is absolute respect for the individual learner. You are where you are. Nobody is ahead. Nobody is behind. You are where you are. And my responsibility is to help you take your next step. So, where can it work? Well, we've done a lot of work with it in languages, and we now have the Phil approach from elementary schools through middle and high school, and even several universities now in the United States, which are beginning to adopt this. But we're also looking at other discipline areas besides languages, because the same principles can hold true. So beyond language learning, it can be in the sciences, in mathematics. He has a social studies teacher across the hall from him who said, "You know what? I want to begin incorporating some of those ideas into my US history class." Sure, fine. We can help you do that. So 1 minute left. AI can serve as a key element to help learners build their futures. Now, Phil is not dependent on the use of AI, but it makes it so much easier. Like when that student learning Japanese can play Minecraft online. So we have some students who learn without AI, but AI has become a very useful part of it. So the future isn't better instruction, it's a better system for learners. We have to design, we can't improve on the buggies, right? That's what we had in the industrial age. We inherited an old system, but we really have to design for something new. So remember, we're at an evolutionary point. where students can begin to design the future, where the right time, I'm convinced, has really come for us to flow into some new structures. So, questions? Yes,
Thank you so much.
and I may not have answers, but we're learning, right?
Okay,
Excuse me, before the questions, so the research was made by both of you, because I have the name also of.
Yes,
Can I introduce him, because give him the credit,
Uh-huh.
so. The research was conducted by Professor Welch and Ryan Allen, who is a Spanish teacher of Delmar High School in the Delmar School District, Delaware. He holds an EdD from Salisbury University and is actively involved in the world of language education and teacher leadership initiatives. Thank you very much. Thank you.